So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for the Center of Excellence for having us here today. So we're hoping our time this afternoon be very fruitful and having a good conversation, good information being conveyed on this timely topic. So real quick introduction, I'm Joe Gregory. I'm with the FHWA Office of Operations in our headquarters in Washington, D.C. So I'm the overall task manager for this particular project that's going to result in a publication that we're hoping to post on our website within the next couple of weeks or so. So stay tuned for that. But the point of this webinar here is to just maybe give you some highlights about what we found in this particular research, but also give you an opportunity to hear from some state DOT peers, specifically from Montana, Georgia, and South Dakota, in terms of how they applied Cismo to a specific activity in rural areas. Excuse me. Next slide. So what we're hoping to cover today is you'll get a chance to get to know each of the speakers, but also just give you some insights. Hopefully I can share you some insights from the FHWA in terms of what we're seeing nationally and what we're hoping to get out of this particular project. And then we can get on the peer presenters and, like Adam said, some Q&A, make sure we have enough time for that. Next slide. Thanks. So just real quick, to give you just a background in terms of what we were thinking of as we were developing ideas for this project. During the Sharp 2 phase a few years back, one of the key products we really wanted to really showcase was the capability maturity model, which really focused on building the organizational capacities for state and local agencies as they advance their overall TSMO efforts. And one of the key dimensions of that particular model is culture, really trying to change the culture from what was more, what we consider more legacy culture, but also mainstreaming that culture to really consider TSMO and really support TSMO as they move forward in terms of how they look at their transportation system. One of the key feedbacks that we received as we were doing this was at least perception that TSMO, it's good and all, but it seems like it's only applicable for urban and maybe suburban areas because that's where all the traffic is at. And this created a real challenge, particularly for states and regions that were primarily rural, where they struggle to see how can TSMO really be effective in terms of what we're doing. So recognizing that the rural areas are a completely different dynamic than urban and suburban areas, we still saw some applicability for applying TSMO here, even though it may look slightly different. So we're hoping to really dive in deep into that today. Next slide. So as far as our desired outcomes, we really wanted to capture the current state of the practice of advancing TSMO in rural areas, specifically toward 5 key TSMO strategies or areas: road weather management, incident management, work zone management, planned special events. And those were TSMO strategies that state and local agencies have been doing for quite some time, but particularly hone in on the rural areas. And then the 5th one is seasonal demand. So a lot of rural areas may experience that, especially if they're near some high traffic tourist destinations such as national parks or ski resorts or even beach destinations, where not even counting the traffic within the parks and the resorts, but the traffic leading into it and coming out of it can create a huge backup on the main route. So we're really hoping to explore that and just share opportunities and challenges for implementing TSMO in these situations. Also, we really want to hone in on some emerging trends, emerging technologies that we see that could be really applicable. So it could be things like connect automated vehicles, broadband access, crowdsourcing data, just as a few examples in terms of what we looked at. Next slide. But to just give you a high level picture, just to start off the conversation in rural areas, we understand that rural areas do have a unique set of challenges in terms of mobility and even reliability. There are larger geographic areas that create longer trip durations and can lead to even longer emergency response times, given where the incidents may be at, especially if they're in remote areas that may not have as much cell phone coverage. So you may have a high number of one or even two lane roads that experience disruptions due to things like crashes or even slow moving vehicles, particularly agricultural vehicles. Next slide. So given on top of that, you also have to factor in there are fewer alternate routes in rural areas. So if there is a work zone or if there's an incident, the detour routes may take a very long time to maneuver, and there may not even be one available depending on where it's at. So that's something we have to consider. Many rural roads are made of gravel and dirt and may make them a potential safety hazard and even impassable in certain weather events. And it's also a challenge of challenging driving conditions, especially if you're going into steep mountain grades, drop-offs, sharp curves, and even narrow bridges. And even the presence of animals on roadsides can increase the likelihood of collisions with vehicles and pose their own safety issues. Next slide. Also factoring in maybe certain evacuations of natural disasters, maybe as it relates to hurricanes, wildfires, flooding, that can present even more of a challenge, and even in avalanches in certain parts of the country can definitely present its own challenge and safety hazards as well. We talked about briefly about telecommunications, cell phone coverage. There tends to be some gaps there due to lack of power and infrastructure that's deployed in rural areas. And also the capabilities can be spotty and maybe not so dependable. Next slide. So now that we talked briefly about just at a high level on the rural landscape, I just really want to hone in on the TSMO element. So to make sure we're on the same page, here's our definition of TSMO as in legislation. It's an integrated program that optimizes the performance of the existing multimodal infrastructure through implementation of system services and projects to preserve capacity and improve security, safety, and reliability of transportation systems. So TSMO, by its own definition, it's multimodal in nature. It's cross-jurisdictional because that's recognizing that the driver of the vehicle is not going to care who owns the road. They're just going to be caring about whether or not they get to their place on time and in a consistent manner, a safe and consistent manner. And then really looking for options to improve the performance and even optimize it without looking into adding capacity. So that's the context of TSMO that we're exploring. Next slide. So some of the benefits that we found through TSMO, greater reliability in traffic, improved safety, reduced congestion, less wasted fuel. There's improved components in terms of livability, economic vitality, and in general, it's a more efficient use of resources, particularly in terms of facilities and funding. Next slide. So we talked about some of the challenges in rural areas. I won't repeat too much of what you see here, but I just want to make sure we keep that in mind where we're talking about a large geographical area with few alternative routes, difficulty in accessing power communications, even a high cost to bring that out there, fewer resources that may be available, and even historically there could be some underserved areas in rural parts due to historic underinvestment. Next slide. Another key issue that we found is that in cases of vandalism and theft of rural technology and materials, such as copper theft, as an example, there's staffing and workforce development in terms of the unique difficulty in hiring and retaining skill and maintenance technicians for these rural technologies, and then alternative transportation modes other than the automobile. There could be much fewer options and less frequent services in these areas. So next slide. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dennis, who's definitely key in the research and developing this material, just to go through each of the 5 issues that we talked about in terms of some of the issues that we see and where TSMO can be applicable. So I'll turn over to Dennis.
Thanks, Joe. Let me switch screens here real quick. And so Joe talked about the overall arching concerns in the rural area, and we're going to talk specifically about some of the issues in different areas, such as road weather management. So the issues related to that would be managing snowplow operations over a large geographic area, managing evacuations from natural disasters such as hurricanes, forest fires, flooding, collecting road conditions and closure information in rural areas that lack quality sensors or data, and then blocking and spilling into traffic lanes in chain-up areas. Some of the benefits related to road weather management would be early warning and detection can improve the road user safety. Quality real-time information can improve pre-trip planning, and then allocate limited road weather equipment more efficiently and improve reliability and reduce unexpected delays. So some of the common strategies related to road weather management would be the use of dynamic message signs for real-time weather alerts and pavement condition information, speed advisory messages to encourage drivers to comply with recommended safe speeds in response to deteriorating weather conditions. Flashing beacons may be activated manually or automatically if tied to a road weather monitoring system. In the area of traffic incident management, it's difficult to gauge proper incident response levels needed given reduced monitoring equipment and communications. Greater spacing of interchanges on rural interstates makes access to incidents more difficult, and roughly a 50% longer emergency response time occurs in rural areas. Also, there's dedicated incident response requires ongoing commitments of funding. It's easy in the urban areas, but it's a little more difficult in the rural areas. And there's also a limited understanding whether a dedicated incident response program is cost effective in rural areas. But some of the potential benefits of traffic incident management would be to reduce the duration and impacts of traffic incidents, improve the safety of motorists, crash victims, and emergency responders, and overall minimize delays and road closures. So some of the common strategies to achieve this would be quick clearance policies and procedures that aim to promptly remove vehicles, and traffic incident management programs that provide courtesy patrols or service patrols. In the area of work zone management, some of the specific issues are unexpected queues in usually uncongested areas, which can lead to severe crashes and delays. Inattention on long rural work zones or long stretches leading up to work zones causes increased crashes. And multiple active work zones in a single corridor can limit movement of oversized vehicles and create long detours. But some of the benefits that arise out of these two strategies could be enhancing safety of both the road user and workers, reduce aggressive maneuvers at work zones, improve ability to react to stopped or slow traffic, and reduce the impact on worker productivity. Some of the common strategies for work zone management is smart work zone systems with dynamic message signs, video cameras, and radar provide motorists with real-time traffic updates. And then where stopping is mandatory in a work zone, drivers are required to turn on their emergency warning flashes to alert following vehicles of the work zone stopping condition. Related to special event management in rural areas, events are less frequent, providing fewer opportunities to learn what works best. It's difficult to anticipate demand, projected congestion conditions, and determine appropriate event management strategies when all events are unique. And then collaboration with law enforcement and transportation agencies to coordinate event management in rural areas is limited in some cases. But the benefit side of these strategies could significantly improve the safety and reduce delay due to increased congestion. It can also allow event participants to smoothly and efficiently enter and exit the event location, and you can encourage multi-mode transportation options. So some of the common strategies would be to schedule sufficient time before the event for planning and coordination among stakeholders. You can use separate radio frequencies to aid communication among event coordinators and staff. Ensure open communication among stakeholders before, during, and after the event. And then hold post-event meetings to identify lessons learned, shortcomings, and successful practices for future events. Seasonal demand management issues are going to be, increase in traffic demands resulting in congestion and traffic delays, such as, beaches in the summer or mountains during snowstorms, and potential weather conditions that only allow road work during peak tourism season. The benefits, obviously, of trying to address these would be to reduce congestion, improve safety, and to improve travel time reliability. So some of the common strategies for this would be contraflow lanes, reversible lane operations, and emergency shoulder use can all increase capacity of a roadway network. And then adaptive signal control can be used to manage seasonal congestion for fluctuating travel demand. In the area, Joe did mention emerging trends and technologies, specifically for rural areas. Some of the trends are transportation network companies providing service in rural areas, using crowdsourced data, and the interest in expanding broadband communications into the rural areas. Oops, sorry. And some of the emerging technologies would be related to connected vehicles in terms of communications and warning systems, and then the use of unmanned aerial systems. With that, I'll turn it back over to Joe.
Yeah, at this point, we can turn it over to Mike from Montana DOT and share with his experience in road weather management.